the DAWbench Radio Show, the official podcast of DAWbench.com.
Welcome to the DAWbench Radio Show. I am your host, Vin Curigliano of AAVIM Technology in Melbourne, Australia, and I am joined again by Pete Brown of Microsoft in Maryland in the United States. Welcome, Pete.
Thanks, Vin. How are you doing today?
I'm doing fine, man.
It's early.
Yes, these daylight saving and time zone things that we're juggling is getting a little bit tougher, but
somehow it always works out for me, and you get the short end of it, though. So I think that's okay.
Yeah, look, I always take the early shift, but it was interesting. Yep. You guys in the east coast of America kicked in your daylight saving earlier than us. I suppose where ours changes in about 2 weeks, but it's okay. I'm awake. I'm a bit fuzzy, but I'm awake. Now, today we have a special guest coming in from Oslo in Norway, and that is Stian Aagedal, who is the founder and lead developer at Acon Digital, who are industry-leading developers of cutting-edge cross-platform applications focusing on digital audio editing, mastering, and restoration, and have been developing these products for close to 3 decades. Welcome, Stian.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
You're most welcome, Stian. Now, just quickly, I always like starting the show with a point of reference from my end. Now, with Acon Digital and with the Acoustica editing program, which is your main program, this is one, and I'll admit it, and I'm a little bit embarrassed, this is one that actually completely slipped under my radar. And I only discovered you guys probably about 2, maybe 3 years ago when I was looking for some restoration tools, just editing the dialogue for the podcast. There was a particular show where there was some really tricky clicks and pops in the middle of words, and I've got a fair few restoration tools, and just none of them are working, and some of them from way better known brands, we'll say that, and none of them were actually just removing these clicks, and I stumbled on your restoration suite, and it immediately just did the job, and I went, wow. And where have these guys been? And I purchased the package. So I had it on the demo first, and I immediately purchased the package. And then I emailed you saying, mate, where have you been hiding? That's just fantastic tools, and I've bought it outright. And then I became a dealer after the fact, which is great. And then just doing the additional research with your history, I was literally stunned with the when the first version of this application was released, and which was 1994, which actually precedes some of the better known ones that I was actually using in those mid to late 90s. So that's an amazing run for a development run for Acoustica. So I think it would be great if we can start by you giving us an overview of your personal history with music, computers and coding, and your eventual journey to founding Acon Digital and your ongoing role there.
Yeah, sure. My interest in coding started really early. We bought a home computer back in, I was 7-8 years. And that was an Oric 1, a really rare kind of home computer.
So what was the computer? What was it again?
An Oric 1 from a British company. I don't remember the name anymore, but it was a really known brand. And there weren't really many games or software packages for the computer, unlike the more known computers like Commodore, etc. So basically, I had to write software myself, either reading listings in BASIC from magazines or trying to do some coding myself. And I had an older brother that also was interested, and I learned the initial steps from him, and then took it from there. And when it comes to music, I also played in the school band, I played the trumpet, and so I always had an interest for music, and I eventually started learning piano as well when I turned 13 or 14. So music has always been an interest for me, and at one point these two interests kind of merged into one when the family bought an ADDA converter card that was meant for analog to digital and digital to analog conversion, actually for industrial use, not for audio recording at all. Mm-hmm. But it nonetheless had the 12-bit converter on it, and we could sort of push the sample rate, I think, up to 15, 16 kilohertz. Right. And it was kind of the beginning of audio recording. And that was before Sound Blaster and all these early audio cards. So I was around, I think, 14 years or something when we bought that card. And I obviously needed some kind of software to record from the card, because it wasn't really meant for audio. So I started writing that myself, and that was like the first audio software for recording and playback that I wrote. And Acoustica is sort of the continuation of that, in a sense. So Acoustica started as a hobby project for me when I was a kid, and then it wasn't called Acoustica at the beginning, but eventually the first version of Acoustica was launched, and as you said, back in 1994, when I was still in, you could say, high school. So I was around 17, 18 years mm-hmm. when that was launched. And so it has been around for a long, long time. And the reason why, although the company history is actually even a bit more convoluted, it was a company that was founded by my father. He did engineering consultancy, and he founded the company back in 1987. And since I was still in school at that time, it was a bit also too much just to found a separate company for the things I was doing. So I started to sell the software through the company of my father, and that was then Acon. So that's the history of the beginnings of Acon Digital.
Right, but the company that your father founded, when you said engineering, that was that audio engineering, or was it?
No, this was totally as a real engineering. He was doing offshore installations and security on boats, safety on boats and stuff like that. So it was a completely different story.
Right.
But okay. The company was up and running, and accounting and everything was taken care of. So it was really convenient for me, obviously.
Yes.
Nice. Is there history behind the name? Does it have any special meaning, or?
That was actually my father's name is Arild, and he had a consultancy company, so it was kind of Arild Consult. So. Acon, yeah.
Yeah, awesome. So let's chat about some of these milestone releases. I mean, 1994 was your first. Now, these are Windows-based applications. So 1994, this would have been 16-bit and on Windows 3.1. Am I right?
Yep.
Yeah. Okay. So can you talk us through some of those milestone releases? So and they seem, look, I've got them all nicely printed out here and the years and stuff.
Yeah, I think I'll even have to look at the prints myself because I don't remember everything in detail. But as I mentioned, the initial release, it was back in 1994, and already back then it was kind of having many of the features that you expect from an audio editor today. So you had copy and paste editing, and there was something called playlist editing back then, because it wasn't really, it kind of, so when you did editing, it kind of moved the data around. And so if you did copy, if you cut out audio, it had to move all the audio that was behind the cut. So it was kind of time consuming to do minor edits. So that was why there was also an option to do playlist editing. You could just choose the sections that you wanted to include in the final result, and then you can edit those. And it also had effects like time stretching and transposing, compressing, reverb, all the things that you would expect from an audio editor. And they even had a plug-in system so that you could load a DLL that contained some code, also binary code for audio processing, and use that inside the first version of Acoustica. Obviously, that never picked up, but nonetheless, it was there.
Right.
I'm always impressed with how much folks like you were able to accomplish back then, because there are a lot of people who don't have history going back that far and don't realize that a PC at that time had maybe a couple of megs of RAM to do all of this in, and super slow processors.
Yeah, it obviously had to be much more patient than we are today. So you had to wait a long time to get, also you had to wait for the processing. It wasn't real time. You couldn't even pre-listen to the settings that you had. So it was like, more or less, you had to do the settings and click OK, and it worked for quite a while, and then you could listen to the results. So the workflow wasn't really what you would expect today, but it works.
Yeah. Well, look, prior to, I don't have to rack my brain here, but 1994, the only stereo editor that really comes to mind was DigiDesign Sound Tools, and we're a completely different realm. It was a proprietary sound card, and
I'm not sure. I think SoundForge was released quite early too. I'm not quite sure about the date, but it was also very early.
Yeah, so just before we came on, I was just scrambling around doing a little bit more research just for the other two editors. And the SoundForge was one, WaveLab was the other one, because they're the ones that I was more familiar with and I was actually using. And this is how I think you fell through the cracks, because I didn't really need to look at anything else because I had those two, and I was using them for different things, like I might be doing my editing in WaveLab, but I might be constructing my CD in SoundForge, or they had a thing called CD Architect back then. So both of those tools were doing the job. But doing a little bit of history, I found WaveLab was released definitely in 1995, so you actually preceded WaveLab. But SoundForge, I digging through, and every time I'm going, okay, SoundForge version history, they weren't going back before 2003. And I'm like, well, hang on. I knew it was way before that, because, Acid, for example, which was another one of the Sonic Foundry applications, was 1998. If you remember that was that loop-based DAW that,
yeah, sure,
that preceded Ableton Live by a couple of years, or a year or so. So I think you might be right. I think SoundForge, Sonic Foundry was founded in 1991. Look, if SoundForge beat you to the punch, it wouldn't be by much, Stian. It couldn't be by much, maybe 93.
No, I remember seeing it when I was still in high school, I don't really know when they started. I suppose they started when the company was founded, more or less, with the development, and then might have released it close to the first release of Acoustica. But I think they were before Acoustica. I'm quite sure. Yeah. Yeah,
but like I said, if they were, it wouldn't have been by much. So, scrolling back to that era, pre-Windows 95, I was still on the Atari. I didn't touch Windows until Windows 95 and 1995, and I was a Cubase user, so that's why I was more familiar with WaveLab, because Steinberg we're distributing that application. It's actually, as you know, it's more a one-man show, with Philip Gautier, I think that's how you pronounce his surname, but that's Philip's show. That was his main application. He was the only guy that touched that code until the Mac port, and the Mac port was 2010. So it was very much a one-man show, but just under the umbrella of Steinberg, which again makes you unique as well, because you're one of these companies that have survived this whole, close to 3 decades without, we'll call it, larger company umbrella or intervention. We'll call it, whether umbrella or intervention. So let's just go through some of these milestone releases. And I noticed that the milestone releases, it's not like you're punching out a milestone every year or so. I mean, there's a good, 3 to 5 years between them. But then obviously in between all of those milestones, you've got a stack of revisions and feature lists that you actually add within that version. So do you want to go through a couple of the others as well? So
yeah, sure. Yeah. Version 2 was released in 1999, and that was the first version that included a denoise tool, which has later become really important part of Acoustica with all the audio restoration tools that are available. And the user interface was improved, and there was also a new wavelet analysis. I think I forgot to mention that the first version also had spectrum and spectrogram analysis back then. So that was added in version 2. And that picked up much better because then the internet was much more, had gained much more acceptance, and it was possible to sell software online worldwide without much, without any dealers. And so that kind of boosted everything.
Yeah, of course.
So then came version 3, which was kind of a rewrite, because I was earlier writing with these Borland tools, starting with Turbo C and Borland C, and then the version 3 was then rewritten with the Microsoft tools. And then the audio engine was non-destructive, so it didn't move around audio data anymore. So we could skip the whole playlist editing stuff, and you could do like really fast cuts, and also undo and redo was possible to do without limitations, because you just managed like a set of sections that were processed internally, so everything was much smoother and faster. And it also added audio CD recording and tracking port from audio CDs, and higher sampling rates, and better, also high resolutions, and also DirectX audio effects, which was a big thing back then.
That's a pretty impressive list of features for 2003, Stian. It was so you were definitely moving at a pretty decent pace by that point. Now, hey Pete, did you have any questions for Stian about the programming languages that he was using?
Yeah, I was curious. How big was the dev team? Was it still just you at that point? And you'd mentioned the Borland products. I'm well familiar with those, so no questions on the programming languages there. You moved away from the giant checkboxes and stuff, and the gray textured backgrounds into into the more plain stuff, right? But can you talk a little bit about that? Like your dev team, if it was just you, or?
Yeah. It was just, I was the only one working on Acoustica, and actually, honestly, until this day, I'm the only one coding on Acoustica. So it's basically a one-man show. I have help, obviously, for other stuff, like handling support and science stuff and things like that. But I'm the only one actually doing coding.
But you get to do the fun stuff,
exactly.
Support's not the fun side of things. So yeah, so we're going to talk about some other things here, and it'll be curious to know kind of what your progression was to, because we have listeners who are just getting into this space, and there are a lot of blockers for like how do you learn DSP, and how do you learn AI, and how do you learn all these things, and kind of where you went from that. So that would be helpful to know as you're going forward here.
Yeah, when I started when I was back in school, then we actually had to sneak into the library, me and a couple of friends, into the computer science library here in Oslo at the university in Blindern. And the lady working there was nice and let us dig through the books, and we were reading what we could find. And there was some literature on things like doing reverb and chorusing, and I did read what I could find, and also the internet, when that came and became more popular, there was a lot of things to find there. But it's very much something I've looked up myself and learned myself. But I've started studying then in Germany, in Karlsruhe, computer science in the autumn 1994. And that obviously helped a lot. There's quite a lot of mathematics in Germany, more than elsewhere, I think. So we had the first part, the first 2 years, called the Vordiplom. We had almost the same maths as those who were going to be mathematicians afterwards. So it was that was really helpful to just learn the basics. And then you just have to read literature and follow what you can find. Nowadays it's easier, I suppose, because you have everything. There's so many nice things on YouTube and just reading online, so you can find the information if you want to.
Nice. Vin, I don't know about you, but for me in school, maths was, it's what killed me. It was all the higher level math was just not happening. So.
Oh, right. Well, maths was one of my favorite subjects, and I'll actually blame my grade 6 teacher, Mr. J.J. Jennings, for that. But he instilled this amazing love of maths into the class.
Very nice.
And that kind of carried me pretty well through all through my secondary years as well. You know, I didn't go to university because I was actually a tradie back in the day, but that carried me through my secondary education. I've always been really strong in maths, so yeah. I
was good up until the higher level calculus, and then I was done at that point. So
yeah, and look, and my wife has a bachelor in applied maths as well. So you know, maths is it's a bit of a strong suite around here.
But it sounds Stian. You've been a bit of an overachiever, which is great, and that sort of explains the quality of the products and stuff you've had at this point. So interesting to know it was you and your bootstrapped background that really kind of got this going.
So where are we? Oh, version 4. I mean, we don't have to go through every major milestone release, but I think version 4, that one is worth mentioning because it seems like it included a whole stack of stuff at that. So it was like a bit of a turning point there as well with version 4.
Yes, indeed, it added the VST effect support, which was obviously really important, and the user interface started looking a bit more like what it looks like today with these dockable window panes, and you could have real-time analyzers running, and where we have the FFT analysis and phase correlation meters and LED meters and stuff. And it brought a whole range of new processing tools with it, including limiting and declipping and the clicker and the crackler. So many of the tools.
Yeah, and that was 2006. And like I said previously, your milestone releases there's a good 3 to 5 years between them. So I'll just go quickly through some of the others because there's a stack to talk about with some of the later versions and the technology that you've implemented in some of these. So version 5 You had your standard and your premium. So you kind of had a 2-tier type of product line. But the interesting one with that one is that you included all your mastering and restoration tools. So you bundle your mastering and restoration plugin bundles. And this is the important one for me, 7.1 surround support. So that's no small feat. I mean, some of the major DAWs don't even have surround support yet. So that was a major one. So with the mastering and restoration tools, so that's a completely different avenue. So you had your editor, and you've just included surround in that editor, and now you've also got the plugin suites. Do you want to talk a little bit about the plugin suites?
Yeah, sure. There were actually, even before the restoration suite, there were a couple of DirectX plugin suites, Studio Clean, which was kind of the noise reduction stuff, and audio restoration stuff, and Studio Necessities was another one, and Studio Time. Yeah, those were the three. Studio Time, with DirectX, you had the nice thing that you could actually implement time stretching, because it's allowed for plugins to change the duration of the audio. So there was a high quality time stretcher available, and the Studio Necessities consisted more or less of like the bread and butter mastering tools, like compressing and limiting and equalizers and stuff like that. So so those were then included in the premium edition, the whole range of plugins, and the VST version didn't arrive before 2013. That was the restoration suite as we know it now.
Yes.
And that was cross-platform VST and audio unit on Mac, and a bit afterwards also AAX then for Pro Tools.
Yes, yeah. And also you introduced multi-track editing. So can you give us a little bit of information on that? Is that similar to like a montage type of?
Yes, it's kind of a rudimentary multi-track editing tool, so you can place tracks on a timeline and mix clips together, and you can do a simple audio volume automation and pen automation stuff, and obviously clip and trim the clips that you have,
right?
But it's not really intended as a substitute for a DAW. So it's you can't do multi-track as a real multi-track recording. You can't record on multiple tracks simultaneously, for example. So it's more like a tool to just to mix stuff together quickly and as well as that.
Right. So it wasn't. So it wasn't actually so it's a multi-track editor, but do you have, so can you actually say, for example, track arm 16 tracks?
No, you can't really do it. You can only record on a single track at a time.
Okay, so it's more multi-track editing, not multi-track recording. Okay, that's cool. Yeah. So you got the 7.1 surround, and version 7, that's been around since 2017. So that's a there's at least a 5-year development run there, and there's a stack of stuff that's been included in that development time frame. I think 7.4 was introduced a stack of stuff in 7.4. Now, is that when the AI and the neural engine and machine learning algorithms and plugins started coming into play? Was that 7.4 or was it earlier than that?
It kind of started with 7. The first introduction to AI was 7.2, but that was more a tool, an online or an open source project called Spleecher from a company called Deezer in France that does streaming. Mm-hmm. And they had an open source project where they tried to analyze complete mixes and create stems out of the mix, so you can separate like the vocal and drums and bass and even piano from a complete mix and remix those elements or just extract those stems. And that was based on AI, and that was kind of the introduction for me to AI. I was obviously watching it closely and read a bit of literature and stuff, but that was the first hands-on experience because you can just take those, that was written in Python and TensorFlow, so you can't really integrate it easily into something like Acoustica, where you have to have some kind of real-time feel to it. You can just wait for the machine to process minutes and then get the results you want to have, real-time feedback, so that you can mix the separate stems without waiting. So we had to code everything for that, and so that was the start. And then I kind of saw the potential of this technology and wanted to use the same technology also in the audio restoration tools. So I started writing what you call a model inference library from scratch. That is actually applying one of these neural network models on audio, so that you can process to remove either noise or reverberation that's not wanted or stuff like that. So that started, I think, around 2020.
Right. Now, just quickly, just rewinding back to Remix, because just to be a little bit clearer for the people listening in, what Remix does, and this is my understanding, is that you've got a mix of a full song, and you run Remix across it, and it actually splits it into, would you say, up to 5 stems? So you could have, your drum, bass, vocal, guitar, keyboard. I'm not sure how distinct it can actually separate all of those elements, but is that roughly what it does? It actually takes the full mix and then splits it into more, instrument group and vocal group components. Is that what it does?
Yes, exactly.
Right.
It's a bit difficult when it comes to different instruments. The piano is working sort of. Vocal, it's kind of interesting to see actually what the AI does. It kind of looks at the if you look at the spectrogram of a recorded voice, you can see that there are very special fluctuations in the pitch, and the AI seems to pick those up and is really good then at seeing what's vocal and extracting those. If you have like a piano and a guitar, they will appear sort of like flat lines in the spectrogram, and they are much harder for the AI to separate than vocals and drums. Obviously, they look completely different in the spectrogram. So it's a bit limited. You can't expect to like separate a violin from a viola or something like that. But,
right.
But to a certain extent, it works quite, especially for when it comes to vocals, drums, bass, and everything else. That works really well.
Right. So, I mean, there's always going to be a little bit of bleed between some of those instruments that are close together in that spectrum, obviously. But, yeah.
Definitely. And there, we have to admit, there are still lots of artifacts when you do those processes. And we're trying to improve that, and we are working on training this ourselves. We still use the Spleeter coefficients out of the model that they've trained, so we want to move away from that, but that's not quite there yet, but that's something we are working on. And obviously you need a lot of training data to do these trainings, so that's a bit of a hurdle to get enough training data that you actually have the right to use.
Right. Yeah, there's a lot in the industry right now about trying to figure out, because the copyright laws and stuff don't really cover use in training models, and so people are trying to sort that out. But I do find it interesting that you are looking at doing some training yourself on this, because that was my next question, is if you were just implementing straight up models that came from academia, or if you were starting from your own stuff from scratch.
No, so definitely also the extract dialogue tool that was trained here, and I should mention then that I teamed up with a company here in Oslo called Soundly. That's a sound effects library.
Yes,
a really known one, and has high quality recordings and a huge library, and that's all tagged and nicely nicely recorded, as I said. So that's a perfect set of training data for the step that we are doing. So I teamed up with them, and we even founded a new company called Hands that will focus on the technology behind this. So the inference library that I was talking about earlier, that is now a part of Hands, and we'll try to sell that to other businesses as well as through licensing, because there are many more use cases than just post-production like Acon Digital is into. So we have all the real-time communication stuff, and even smaller devices, and the models that we train, they are small, and we don't require a GPU to use them, and the model sizes are, we have like 700,000 parameters compared to others that have like several millions to achieve the same thing. So that's kind of we try to get the AI lightweight and nice to use, so that you can deploy it on basically any kind of device.
That was you anticipated my next question on that, was about acceleration, because it's, Apple's got their neural accelerators. We have ours on ARM devices, and then of course there's like CUDA and stuff like that. Has that been restrictive to you to just stay below the threshold needed to require acceleration, or is it just that the things that you're doing simply don't require it?
We managed to do the things without, so that's it would of course run even faster with on the GPU, obviously, but it's since it's also there's just several. You have to do a certain amount of processing before it makes sense to use the GPU,
right?
Because there's the bottleneck turns out to be the memory transfers instead of actually doing the actual processing. So we are probably below that level, and it works. The algorithm. Also, the new extract dialogue algorithm that will come runs on my Ryzen 9. It runs 26 times real time on a single core, so it's quite fast. So you don't really need a GPU for that. So that's kind of nice. So kind of nice to not having to deal with all this. Special cases like the neural engine in the Apple processors, for example, because it's restricted, and you have to use those tools that you mentioned to get access to them.
Right.
Yeah. For me, the whole area of AI, and I think we're all aware that it's absolutely exploding at the moment. There's always going to be conversations about ethics, and the whole thing is not so much in the audio processing, but more in the creative spaces, where they're actually creating, pieces of art, whether it's music or actual art stuff. So, that's a long conversation. But in the audio space, and again, there's enough of the ethical kind of argument with, AI creating, attempting to create an arrangement or a song in the style of. Now, I've heard some of them, let me tell you. They're not even close, but it's still an interesting and developing area, and it kind of I don't think scary is the word, but it's something that I think there is some concern that if they lose control of it, how are we going to be able to tell the difference between what's actually been created by a human, what's been created by an AI algorithm. But in regards to how you're using it with just the tools available to us, I mean, I've been a direct benefit of some of your latest plugins, the dialogue, the extract audio, the deplosive, and the declick dialogue plugins just work so much better than anything else. And I've got quite a few tools in that area, but there was no way, for example, I had a recent guest that, actually a couple of guests where for whatever reason there was a whole stack of plosives. Now, usually if there's one or two plosives or, half a dozen plosives throughout the show, I'll just nip them individually. But when they are constant throughout the whole show, I'd be there for a month, trying to deal with the plosives. So I gave the deplosive dialogue plugin a go, and I'm saying I'm just going to put it on and just across the whole lot. And I actually applied it at the start of my editing, and I was still doing the raw editing, and I forgot that it was there because there was little. Well, actually, I mean, I really had to, if there was any artifacts, they were so minute that unless you've got headphones on and some volume, you're not going to even pick the artifact. Now, if you try and use like a normal deplosive plugin across like the normal speech where there's no plosives, let me tell you, the artifacts would have it was unusable. So I was a direct benefit of that technology, Stian, and then I actually mentioned that to you pre-show. It was quite amazing. So and the extract audio is that what it's called?
Extract dialogue. Extract
dialogue. That one there. So I had the latest version of that one, and Pete's furnace.
Which kicked in during this one. So
yeah, I know. And you know what? I couldn't care less. But in that previous show, it really kicked in, Stian. And I mean, I'm like, what the fuck is that? And and because the thing is, I didn't know in which dialogue it was, whether it was Pete's or the other guests. And then we had to get to it. There was a bit of a break, and I've just gone, what was that? And he says, "Oh, sorry, mate, it was my furnace." Now, in between him not talking, it's not a problem. I cut and tail and do all my fade ins and fade outs. But even while he was talking, this thing was still rumbling away in the background, so it was still there.
It's like the boiler room of a ship.
Oh yeah, it's hilarious. but it was amazing. I'm thinking, okay, let's see how good this extract dialogue thing is. I hit it and went, wow, But that one now I didn't, set and forget because I didn't need to. I actually tagged the start and end point. And the other thing with that bloody furnace, Pete, was that it didn't stay at a constant. So there was a constant. Oh, heck no. There was a constant, and then it started slowing down. And so there was about, 5 different noise fingerprints, Stian, but it just, man, just dragged it out. And that one blew me away. Yeah.
And this SM7B that I used for recording here can pick up a bee fart down the street anyway. So that doesn't help.
Yeah. Well, anyone that's listened into the show would know that I get some uninvited special guest appearances from my German Shepherd who can hear me or can just, hear me that I'm talking to the guests and thinks, hey, Dad's awake, starts barking in the background, right in the middle of me talking. And you know what? I couldn't, it didn't get rid of it 100%, Stian. And that's why I asked you. I said, Dave, you got any models for training for dog barks? But it did a pretty good job. It got rid of the vast majority of, her yapping. But so did you actually have, because one of your latest plugins is D-Bird. So obviously that's for people outside. And I think, have you got a D-Wind one as well? I think it was a D-Wind.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah. Yeah. So obviously that's for the reporters outside where they're getting blown apart and there's traffic going past. That's an interesting one. Does it? So the whole thing with traffic, how would you train that? Because there'd be so many different dynamics in that.
Yeah, so that's why we need a huge library like what I mentioned from Soundly, where they have lots of traffic recordings and also dog barks and meows from cats and whatnot. So there are a lot of those in the training set, and we are currently training a new model that's based on the complete set. So hopefully that will work a bit better on the dog barking that you mentioned.
Right.
And we're continuously working on the models as well. So what's coming now is face awareness in those models, because up until now they were just like kind of overlaying a mask in the spectrogram to remove what's noise and what's unwanted. And now we can actually, to a certain extent, then correct phase issues. So if you can imagine having a dialogue, and then you have a background broadband noise in the background, then you won't only get amplitudes, also noise in the amplitudes, but you have to correct for phase issues too, and the new models can do that as well, so they sound a bit more natural. So that we are continuously improving those algorithms to get them better.
Yeah, amazing.
Vin, there's going to be a DAWsy accent remover coming in a new version, I'm pretty sure.
Would you like me to break into my alter ego?
Sure. Let's give it a test.
No way, because no, I'm not going to do it. But I did give the guys a bit of a demo, because they're saying, "Oh, Vin, I do practice my name pronunciations as best I can," and Pete thinks that because I've got an Australian accent, that it's a bit of a limiting. Well, it's a bit more of a challenge. And I've said, "You haven't heard an Australian accent," and I dropped into like a really, really ochre accent. But I won't do that for the.
We'll save it for another day.
We'll save it for a Christmas comedy special or something.
There you go.
There you go. So Stian, with all of the advances with AI, have you got any thoughts of where you think this is actually going to be leading in regards to what kind of tools you can actually develop in future with using the technologies that you haven't already?
Yeah, I think there's loads of potential for new exciting tools, and I think we are just seeing the beginning of what you can achieve. And what's really interesting, I think, are the new tools based on generative AI, where you can sort of like stable diffusion. I don't know if you're aware of those things for images, and using the same technology for audio is of course really interesting as well. So I'm imagining doing in-painting in audio. So if you have instead of the way it works right now, when you have this spectral editor and you have this noise there, and you kind of you have to be really exact when you paint those regions that you want to either mute or attenuate. My hope is that you can just really cautiously just paint over it, and it will actually generate the content for you based on these diffusion models. So there are many interesting things, and I think you can also see also going further with both speech recognition and speech synthesis. If you kind of, instead of going the whole way through, you can kind of re-synthesize speech and do noise reduction that way. I think the new Adobe tool that you might have heard of does something like that. So there are many interesting tools that you can we'll probably see in the future. Right.
So is that where, for example, the complete opposite of extract audio? So if you've got a dropout where it actually resynthesizes and repairs where the dropout is. It actually makes some type of analysis and says, well, okay, I'm going to actually fill that gap. Is that something that you think could be available?
Yes, I believe so, because if it's possible with images, and you can see how marvelous these also Dolly 2 and in the unstable diffusion images look. So if you can, you can do the same thing with audio. I'm quite sure. So it's just a matter of having enough training, and so I really can get there.
Well, I mean, some of the stuff that I've been hearing where they're doing the parody videos and the using the politicians' voices and then basically, it's text to speech, but they're getting the politicians to say some of the most outrageous things, and I'm like, wow, that's kind of getting pretty scary, Yeah,
that's getting into the ethical side, definitely.
Yeah.
That's the way I think we'll probably be a bit cautious about what we offer. It's you have to be sure that you can actually say that the recording is fake. And I've even been thinking about maybe watermarking stuff. Somehow you have to be able to, if you develop such a feature, you have to be able to say if it's a fake recording afterwards or not. Otherwise, it's really into the gray area ethically.
Yeah, and this is the discussion that I think it's a far wider discussion than we can actually cover here, but it is something that is going to be interesting, and I just hope that at least the way that you're working with it is going to just be giving us some amazing creative tools, for the actual human element to use. I think it's inevitable that the AI generated musical content is going to just accelerate if it's just explode. Right. It's exploding. But I've read some interesting interviews with some current artists that have said, "Hey, are you disturbed, by the level and the acceleration of the AI content that's been generated, in, say, for example, your style of music?" And some of the responses have been quite humorous when they're just saying, look, I listened to someone that's tried to generate music in my style and it was garbage, right? So,
won't always be, though.
Yeah, this is, again, this is the thing. There still has to be some human element in it. I mean, AI is actually trained by humans.
Like you said, it's a much larger discussion. And I'll be honest, I think the generative stuff is interesting here, depending on how it's used. But I'm far more fascinated by these more subtle uses of AI for doing the types of things that you're doing now with the Acoustica products and related, because I think those, like, most folks don't realize that there's the same types of technologies involved behind the scenes. It's just a far more subtle change.
Yeah, true.
Well, look, I mean, with the audio stuff, what's actually becoming more focused is all of the noise reduction and background removal, all of that, and it's not only Stian's products that are actually doing that. I mean, some of the other majors are, they carry on like they reinvented the wheel, which has given me a bit of a chuckle. I'm like, Jesus, I think you've missed the memo. You weren't first to the block, and you're not the only one that's actually creating products in their space. But they've obviously got a bigger voice, so they'll make some more noise, I suppose. But all the tools are all very, very similar. But it's, for me, what Stian has brought forward is one of the first. I will say, I don't know whether you pioneered a lot of these technologies in the audio field, but you're one of the first to have actually approached it and focusing more on it. So I think that needs to be commended. And the tools are great. Like I said, I've used them. I mean, I can imagine having extract audio extract dialogue and the Deplosive dialogue plugin 4 years ago when, Jesus, it's nearly 4 years, Pete, I had this podcast going. That's kind of scary. So if I had them back then, I would have been saving me some editing time, let me tell you, That's awesome. Hey, I think, is there anything else regards AI that you want to ask Stian, Pete?
No, I think we'll pin it where we are because there's just so much more to cover in this topic.
Yeah. Okay. Well, one of the other things that I want to mention and have a bit of a discussion about is Atmos, because this is an area that anyone who's listened to the prior shows with myself and Pete would know that this was kind of like my Nostradamus moment, probably about, I don't know, Pete, was it 3 years ago that I came to you discussing the lack of Atmos support on Windows? Probably about, well, let's say it's about 3 years ago.
Sounds like it.
Yeah. And at the time, no one had it. I mean, there was a proprietary Atmos rendering application from Dolby on Windows, very, very expensive. There was none of the DAWs were actually implementing it. Avid had an extension to allow Atmos mixing for Pro Tools, Mac only, and it still is Mac only. That's a point of discussion I'm going to be having with my Avid contacts at some point. So it's still Mac only. And I do remember the discussion, and we covered it. It was kind of like a chicken and egg. They didn't want to put any development time in. They didn't see the point of putting development time in if there wasn't any interest. And I'm, we're in the mind saying, well, how can there be any interest if you're not putting any development time in? So, we're going around in circles, if you remember. And then, a couple of months later, Nuendo implemented it, and DaVinci Resolve. Now, they're the two, I think, were the first, unless Logic obviously has Atmos as well. Cubase has it now. But Stian, I think you're the only stereo and surround editor, we'll say non-dedicated DAW that has Atmos support. Do you want to talk us through that a little bit, please?
Sure. It wasn't really that much of a difference in terms of coding. It's just adding more channels and tagging them properly. And most of the processing tools don't really know that it's an Atmos recording. So obviously the reverb, that's not even included in the standard edition, but that's in the premium edition. But that's an immersive version of the Verbrate reverb that Acon sells that has Atmos support. So that then you obviously need to know where these speakers are, otherwise you can't properly simulate the room. But that's for the other processing tools, it doesn't really matter. So it was kind of easy to add support to Acoustica, so just increasing the channel count and tagging accordingly. So
okay, well, I mean, that's interesting to me in respect that why aren't some of the other major DAWs hopping on this? I just unless there's something inherent within their actual code that makes it more difficult. I don't know. Pete, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's not the first time that it's kind of a scrappy developer has come on and said, like, no, this took me just a small amount of time to do, but the big folks were taking months and months and months. So who knows? It could just be one of those things that opens a can of worms in the audio engine in the product that if you weren't set up for that kind of stuff to begin with, it can be a massive effort. Yeah,
well, one of the major DAWs still hasn't got surround. I think you know which one I'm talking about, and it was a subject that we brought up in one of the shows, and they just simply said, well, our primary user base is not really focusing on that. And I thought, okay. So I think that's probably, if they don't have surround, they're not going to have Atmos.
Yeah, and I think this snuck up on a lot of companies too, because they didn't realize that some of the online video platforms were going to start requiring Atmos or similar formats for videos that they host. So
you know what? I don't know about that, because my Nostradamus moment was in response to some clients coming to me saying, hey, I'm finishing off a TV series, or I've got some future jobs for a movie, and one of their requests is we need some Atmos mixes as well. So that was back when I brought it up. Okay.
Yep.
So I'm not going to give them a pass. That I'm not going to give the developers a pass saying, "Oh, it's kind of snuck up." It didn't. It didn't sneak up. I mean, I'm a lone DAW builder in Melbourne, and I knew about it.
I was giving them benefit of the doubt, man.
Yes, I know. Yes. So look, that's an interesting one with the Atmos, and again, it's a bigger discussion because Apple's is not quite Atmos, and off we go into another tangent. So let's. The other feature that you have introduced that I find really cool is ARA support. I think that's how you pronounce it. ARA, ARA support, where any of the supporting DAWs can actually fire up Acoustica as their main audio editor instead of kind of trying to fly stuff in between the two applications. I thought that was pretty cool. So was that another one that was an easy application?
No, it's definitely not easy.
Right. Okay.
But I had some luck actually. The Acoustica is developed using a framework called Juice, and there was a fork of Juice that Ceremony, the makers of Melodyne, I think they made it in conjunction with another company. I'm not quite sure. I won't say the name because I think I know who it is, but I'm not quite sure, so I won't say.
I think it was Steinberg, wasn't it? Was it Steinberg?
No, it was Steinberg. It was one of a plugin vendor, as far as I remember. But anyway, there was at least a fork of Juice that supported then ARA, and so I looked at that and tried to figure out how it works. And it's just a bit, it's kind of a different way of thinking. I found it a bit difficult to get into, to be honest. So it took a while, but not really wild either. I think I spent like 2 months or something on the development of the ARA plugin. And that is obviously much better for the workflow, especially in the I've been working with Noendo and also the Studio One. In other tools like a Reaper, where you can set up an external audio editor and just let an external audio editor work on a clip and then import it back again easily, then it doesn't make such an impact. But then you can't do that with the Steinberg tools, for example. Only with Wavelab.
Right.
It makes a huge difference when you work with those hosts, and it's kind of part of the project, so it sticks there, and you can always go back and do the edits, and they are non-destructive. So it's a nice feature.
Yeah, very cool, very cool. So let's just move on real quickly. Now, this is probably this is an area I always like discussing with the developers, also with the DAW developers. But this is the area of multi-core and multi-processing, and also you're needing to stay ahead of the curve with all these hybrid processors as well, whether it's Apple Silicon and the new Intel 12th and 13th gen. Now, do you have any multi-processor support in Acoustica?
Yes, and when you use the multi-track editor, then it will do as a spread out on the tasks and on different threads, so that you can utilize all the cores.
Okay.
Also, when you do the batch processing, it obviously splits everything as much as it can, so that you can utilize the whole CPU.
Yep.
When you do the audio, the clip editor is a bit of a different beast. So you have to, you can't do so much in parallel. And in my experience, if you try to, also when you deal with audio, you quite quickly reach a point where it doesn't make any speed improvements, because the tasks that you can parallelize are so small that you don't really get any benefit from it, because you have to do all the extra time you need just to switching between threads and stuff. That takes too much time compared to the benefits. So it's not really used in the in most of the processing, except for remix, for example, where you have the AI tool that we mentioned earlier, where you have different stems, and you have to basically evaluate or do the model inferencing for each of the stems separately, and that can be really nicely separated without any communication between the processes. So that's you can do that in several threads, and so we try to use it where we can, but it's not always that easy with audio.
Right. So if you're not using it with the real-time audio tasks as much, you're probably not running into the concerns that a lot of the other companies hit, which, trying to tell big cores from little cores and which ones perform better and which ones have what instruction sets and things like that.
Yeah, no, we don't really see that in Acoustica to that extent. And as I said, the multi-track editor is kind of rudimentary, so it's not. We don't really have to do low latency stuff, and so we don't. We don't see that much.
Okay, so but when you have a surround or an Atmos session, and if you've got processing on those individual tracks, would that multi-process?
Well, you could, depending on what you do, but you can also, if there's no communication required between the threads, then it would be possible to do each channel separately in a separate thread. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
So frequently, if you can imagine a reverb or something, then you actually do have to lead audio through to do. Yeah. So you soon get, depending on the task that you're doing, you'll quite soon get to the point where it's difficult to get things running in parallel.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I mean that's another larger discussion that we've been having in load balancing or parallelizing serial processes, and this was always, the emphasis was always that, there was the clock versus core, because, the clock is always very, very important because you can easily saturate one single core in a serial process. And I did a stack of testing across 4 different DAWs, and when the extended playback buffering, the individual extended playback buffering was engaged on 3 of the 4 DAWs, they actually load balanced the serial process, whether it was an insert or a group or a bus, which surprised me, to tell you the truth. Interestingly, if with the DAWs that allowed you to switch off the extended buffering or the hybrid engine, it went back to the traditional, what you'd expect to see, as in you put a serial process on it, it spikes one logical core, But with the extended buffering, they would load balance, and it would vary depending on the CPU and how many cores you had. It was very interesting. I mean, I did a stack of stuff on an early 6-core 12-thread machine, and the reason I did that was so we were below the Steinberg MMCSS ceiling with the real-time engine. And
knew you'd work that in here somewhere.
Yeah, I did. But that was interesting, the way that was actually load balancing, because even with Aagedal on, because when I went to one of the current 12th, 13th gen CPUs, and there was more cores, obviously, it was load balancing in a completely different manner. It was still not landing all on a single core, but it was, it was picking, 2 or 4, and then it would shift. Remember, Pete, it would actually shift the load, and I'm like, what's it doing? So it'd get to a certain point, like a time slice, and then it would shift it to a different core. And I thought, what's it doing? So that's an area that is still going to be open for discussion. Because the serial process is not distinctly just landing on one core. So, and I know how difficult it is, and to actually try and parallelize that area. But again, that's not something that you're overly focused on, Stian, because that's more for the larger multi-track DAWs.
Yes, I have to admit that we are focusing on the single track editing stuff, and there are so many competitors in the in the DAW domain that we probably stick with what we are better at doing.
Yeah. So how was the development for the port to the Apple Silicon? Was that an area that gave you too much grief, or was that something that was relatively smooth?
It went pretty smoothly, actually. There wasn't that much of a change. The plugins were a bit trickier than Acoustica itself. Then there are a couple of things. Pro Tools, for example, didn't have. So there wasn't even a version available for beta testing. We kind of just released how we thought it would be.
Right.
Even with AX, universal binaries also for AX before we ever tested it. But it turned out that it actually works straight out the box when we finally got hands on the beta from AAVIM. So that's kind of interesting.
What you're doing in your code, is it mostly just all C code, or do you drop to assembly for stuff?
No, it's all C code. But we try to use vector arithmetic libraries like Intel IPP, for example, and on the Mac side there's Apple VDSP, so that kind of boosts performance.
Right, and it makes your porting easier too. So that's good tip for folks.
Yeah, actually, so I have internally, I wrote a whole library doing signal processing, and it's works on the level of both. So you can actually exchange the vector arithmetic library behind it, and you still and on the also when I do my programming, I don't see what I'm actually using below. So it's just makes it easier to maintain the code.
Yeah. So so is both Acoustica and all your plugin suites, are they all Apple Silicon native now?
Yes, they are.
Okay. So, I mean, that's a double whammy. So it's not only the application and the plugins that are actually native to the application itself, but also the separate plugin suites where you're needing to go AAX, VST3, audio units.
Yeah.
Okay.
And then again, there's a huge help in something like Juice, because there's a community there, and they build this stuff. So we developers don't have to take care of the basic stuff.
Yeah.
So that's been a really great tool for us.
Right. Well, that's interesting, because there's definitely some plugin developers that are dragging their feet more so. But again, who knows what. I'm not a code guy, but there's some of the larger guys that have not ported all of their plugins and virtual instruments across to Apple Silicon.
I think there's an advantage in a company like Acon Digital, and since I'm handling all the coding, I know all the little bits of the code, so I can I have the overview and can do changes. I can imagine that it's much more difficult in a larger company where you have different people working on the same code. Yeah. And then you have an employee that quits, and you have to move the code to another guy or girl, and you have to they have to delve into the code and learn everything from scratch again. So it's a much more difficult task, I suppose.
I wouldn't know anything about that.
Yeah. Yeah. Microsoft's not compartmentalized at all, Pete.
No. And it's not like I'm working on things where the developers working on it are younger than the code that they're working on. So.
Yeah. No, not at all. So yeah, there you go. So look, there is advantage in these smaller companies and smaller development. So you know exactly where the bodies are buried, and you know exactly who to blame if anything goes wrong. I mean, I keep saying that to the smaller developers, even if they've got, some of the guys have got a small team, 2 or 3 developers, and But I think as they get larger, and as you highlighted, you know, you're passing the code on to someone else, and they're not quite connecting the dots. And I feel that some of the qualms that I've presented with some of the larger DAW companies, I wonder how much of that is just caused by that compartmentalization of the sections of the code. Because I mean, some of the bugs and issues that I bring forward, I'm thinking to myself, again, it's coming from a non-code perspective. I'm thinking, do these guys who are actually coding these applications, do they actually use it? Are they actually using the program? Because I mean, some of them are just beggars belief. Some of the issues, and I mean, it could be even just small stuff, just general user experience stuff. I mean, I've got an example of real quickly of just some of these. We call them automated download and installation applications that are becoming more and more popular. And I've had some recent experience because I've been, you know, away from the bench for about 6 to 8 months. I've come back and I'm starting to configure some systems for clients, and I've got the new revised versions of some of these, you know, download and installation applications, and I'm just shaking my head going, this is not as straightforward as you think it is. So, I mean, they're trying to simplify it, but they're not. I mean, and my biggest qualm is that it's quite easy to land the stuff that you're downloading and installing in the completely wrong directory. Some of them actually have submenus where you say, okay, this is where you download, this is where you install the library, for example. Do you want to keep the download or do you want to delete it? There's all of that type of feature set. But it's hidden. I'm going to go into more detail probably on one of the Tech Bytes shows. But it's more hidden for the new user, and I can see myself just getting support calls going, hey, my C drive's full again. And that's been caused by these automated download and installation procedures that will just default and land, you know, like large library installations, for example, on your system drive. I'm thinking, no.
This community is one of the ones that runs into that, and the other one is games, because they're the other ones with gigabyte-sized download packages.
Yeah. So, I mean, and again, I'm going to ask, I'm going to ask both of you, is it simply because you're coding for the lowest common denominator, which is a laptop with a single drive? Is that the premise around why some of these applications are not automatically saying, hey, before you press, you know, install, they're not throwing up a menu going, okay, where do you want this stuff to land? I'm not understanding. Help me understand, guys. Is it simply because the code guys are just working on laptops with a single drive, and they're not even thinking about giving you the option to actually, for example, land the library on a secondary drive?
Well, I'll ask Stian what he thinks, but I'm going to take some blame here for the company, if you will.
No, I'm not saying I didn't mention Microsoft at all.
No, but we don't make it super easy to move these install locations, or, you know, between, like, so first of all, some companies they choose weird locations to begin with, which is strange. But, you know, moving something like, say, program files or moving some of the other stuff over to another drive is not intuitive for most users. And so that's how your main drive gets filled up pretty quickly. Right. Same thing with like where your downloads actually happen. It's not super intuitive how to make that into like another drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's just a thing. Also, I too try to. There are certain guidelines from Microsoft. Where are the programs supposed to land? Where do you put the program data? Where do you put the user data?
Yeah,
and that's kind of you can't change that easily. And you are supposed to put it where Microsoft says. I think that's. Or correct me if I'm wrong, Pete. But
you're right.
So I think that's the reason, and even Acoustica does it with huge AI models and stuff. It puts it into the program data folder where it's supposed to land, and you can't put it on separate drive.
Okay, well, I've got a question real quick. So the primary application folder, should that be, if it's a 64-bit program, should that be under C program files? You know where I'm going with this. Is that where it should, where the program, the main application files for the program should be landing?
You're asking, should it be under program files or program files x86? Is that what you're asking? No.
Yeah. I'm asking, so you've got, main application, we'll say Acoustica or, Cubase or any of these major DAWs, Reaper, and the default application, if it's a 64-bit program, should land in the in the program files. And if it's a 32-bit variant of the program, it should land in program files x86. I know one DAW, one DAW
Some don't,
that don't, they can't even differentiate, and they land both of them in one or the other. But I know of one DAW, major DAW installation that doesn't land it in the program files. And it is the most bizarre thing I've ever seen. And if you try and move it, all hell breaks loose. You completely break it. Do you know which one I'm talking about?
Well, let me tell you the why. Let me tell you.
There's a why. Okay.
There's a why for some of these. So does it need to be C program files? No, it just depends where the program files variable is mapped to. It could be on another drive, but it's usually C. And some apps hard code to C program files, which drives me nuts. But an application starting, I think, when we started making the transition to 64-bit, I think this is when this happened. Don't quote me on that, though, even though I'm recorded with it. We made it so that applications couldn't or shouldn't write to the program files folder. Like if you installed an application in there, that application can't write to its own folder for security reasons. It's actually probably around the same time UAC and a bunch of other stuff popped up, right?
Right.
And so what some developers have done is said, like, fine, we don't want to change where our data is written, so we'll just install the whole application into like program data or some roaming settings folder because we know we can write to that. And it kills me because that's not where your code should be executing from. And then to make it worse, we released some installers for a product years ago that, for the same types of reasons, would actually install your product into that folder, even though we were telling people not to install their product into that folder. So yeah, there's plenty of blame to go around for that one.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, and I kind of quite discovered it by accident when this particular application has some demo songs, and I'm, one of the first things I do when I install a DAW application, unless I've got a DAWbench session for it that I do my stress testing with, is I'll find, the respective demo songs. And so here I am, I've gone, okay, and I've gone to it's a 64-bit app, and I've gone to the program files folder. I've gone, where the did it actually bloody install all of these bloody demo applications? And if I'm not careful, it's going to install, 30, 40 gigabyte of extended library into something. And so I know how to actually, you go into the application and then you have to let it install primarily into its default, all right? So it's flooding everything onto the C. And then before you install all the extended stuff, you have to change all of those settings within the application itself. But even basic things like the demo songs, where to put it? It's not in. It's in what you said before. It's like in a roaming folder. I've gone, why the fuck would they put it there? Because it's actually a hidden folder, right? So you've got to go in, you got to go into C, and you got to, change the attributes to show hidden files and folders, and then you got to find it and go, why? I'm screaming into the void.
This was something we tried to fix and enforce with the store years ago when we forced all those applications to install in a certain place, but I think we went too far in the wrong direction on that.
Right. Yeah. Look, and that's the only major DAW that I know that still does that. I know where the bodies are buried now, so I know how to actually I know how to actually manipulate it and stuff. But there's plenty of clients, let me tell you, right, that if I have not done the primary install for this app and say it's a secondary DAW, and they just flood everything under the sea. And then I get the calls, oh, my C drive's full. Let me have a guess.
Even worse on that, Vin, that roaming folder used to sync across your PCs. We stopped that. It was called roaming because there were settings that would roam from PC to PC. So when somebody's got like half a terabyte of data in that roaming folder, it causes all sorts of problems. We don't really synchronize most of that anymore. So
yeah, well, it's an interesting. It's just a quirk, and I can get around it, and it's just it's Vin, old man, grumpy old man, kind of grumbling that
you have institutional knowledge. That's what you need to say.
Yeah, I'm going to save some of my gripes for the next Tech Bites, Pete. As you know, we do. We do the segment at the end, which we call what is it? Tales from the Crypt, not Tales from the Crypt. What is it? Oh, it's from the bench. The product support stuff that I've been kind of encountering. All right. Well, let's move on. Stian, ongoing, future. I've got a little note here. Future, ongoing development. What's new and if appropriate, what features are coming. I mean, again, you don't have to give away any trade secrets, but is there some areas that you'd like to take Acoustica into, or some new plugins that you're wanting to explore?
No, so the general direction is still the AI stuff, I suppose, and at the same time, just improving the workflow and adding feature requests from customers. And there's some version 7.5 coming, and we'll have some additional tools for audio restoration and
more of the same but better, I think.
More of the same but better. That's probably what.
Nice.
Yeah, and then we have the ongoing version 8, but it's as a separate branch. Then, and I'm not sure if I should tell that much.
No. You don't. No,
interesting stuff coming.
No trade secrets with that one. So obviously, 2017 is when you started version 7. So we're at least 5 years in, and so. You're a little bit overdue for a new version, Stian. Sorry.
I am.
Just going on your previous milestone releases, you're kind of stretching this one a little bit, but
no pressure.
No,
it's kind of it's also a nice side effect when the company is doing well, and it's okay just to make customers happy and give. We are basically giving away new features for free when we do the minor upgrades, and we have given a lot from 7.0 to the current 7.4. If you look at the history, there's lots of new features that people just got for free.
Yep.
So we want to continue that with the 7.5, and then eventually then 8.
That's refreshing.
Yeah, so we try to be a bit, now that all the big companies are going into subscription models and stuff, then we try to be on the other side and actually give people some real value.
Well, look, let's make the point that in between those 7.0 to wherever you finish your, 7 points, you are adding a stack of new features. And I know that 7.2 to 7.4, there was a huge jump of new features as well. So that's great. And okay, so version 8 is in the works. There's some cool stuff coming there, which is very, very cool. I don't... oh, yeah, here we go. Community. General overview of the Acon Digital end user community. So you're saying that you do get some feature requests from the users. Is there a forum? I don't think there was.
This actually, so we did host our own forum quite a while ago, but then it was so cumbersome to maintain with all the spams and stuff. So and right now it's just maintained by the KVR audio site. So you can go there. There's a separate under forum in there then where people can discuss. And then obviously there's stuff like Facebook and Twitter and the support mails. And there's a beta test community as well that are really helpful in helping and testing all these new versions as they come.
That's awesome. I can fully understand and agree what a pain in the ass it is to run a forum, because that's why I shut down my DAWbench one. I had successfully running that one for about 5, 6 years, 7 years, and I'd wake up in the morning and there'd be like 100 bots trying to enter the into the forum. Some of the most ridiculous names, and I've just gone, I haven't got time for this, because they'd get past the security capture and that type of stuff. So they were automate, whatever the automation was, they were getting past all of the security capture stuff that I was putting in place. And I said, I don't have time for this, and then if any of them snuck on, just you'd be spending hours cleaning up the mess that they'd create on the forum. So in the end, I'm with you. I understand why you're using the larger forum spaces to have a sub forum. I mean, I do the same with Gearspace. I have an ongoing couple of threads there with my DAWbench project and the lower latency.
Yes, I've actually seen those.
Yeah, and the lower latency performance database stuff. So, I mean, I don't mind. But look, I do have plans on expanding my my online presence at some point, which we won't discuss here, but I have discussed it in some of the previous shows. I mean, that plan is in place. It kind of got sidelined a little bit over the last couple of years for various reasons, but it's still there and it's in process. It's in progress, so to speak. But I can understand, how difficult it is with the forums, and even again, we get mixed experience with the social media where some of the guys are just saying, "Oh, look, Facebook is, I call it bookface," but I mean, trying to interact with end users and people that are following the work, I actually find it more respectful on Facebook, which kind of surprised me because I have far more problems with the regular forums. There just seems to be. I call them my fan club. I have this fan club that just shadow me for years, just not being overly productive most of the time. They're just having to find some minute crack to leverage with anything that I say or do. I don't understand. It'd be far better use of their time and energy.
I think it's wherever that fan club ends up being, that's got to be the less respectful place.
Yeah, mate, I had some incredible. Look, I've had some really good exchanges. I've had some ridiculous exchanges. I've had some hilarious accusations thrown at me. There was another one thrown at me this week, which I shared with Pete. We don't have to share it now, but it's just like, I've gone, wow, where do they come up with this stuff? But,
With all those accusations, Vin, you should be absolutely rich from all those kickback checks by now.
Yes, I was saying, where the hell is my spiff check?
Yeah.
I'm packing to head off to the Bahamas for my holiday house because winter's kicking in here in Melbourne shortly. I've got to go to my summer house in the Bahamas,
Yeah.
Unbelievable. Anyway, now, is there anything else, Pete, that you want to chat to Stian about, or is there anything that Stian wants to bring up before we kind of close this up?
I think I'm good. It's getting late in the day for Stian, which I really appreciate you hanging out here for this, and love the technical detail you provided here today. I think that'll be really interesting for a lot of people.
Well, thank you, both of you. It's been a pleasure to be here, and thanks for having me. I don't have any special things to add, to be honest. But thank you. It was great to be here.
Okay, and again, you're most welcome, and you're definitely welcome to come back, because I think, especially in this area of AI, that's going to be, we can reconvene in 12 months, and I reckon there's going to be a whole show just to discuss, just even with the AI development stuff. So that's going to be awesome. All right, again, guys, thank you to both of you. Thank you, Stian, for giving your time and energy today. Thank you again, Pete, for being my co-pilot. And with that, on to the next.